Thank you so much for coming tonight. Robert Kiyosaki, the author of Rich Dad, Poor Dad, said once that the biggest difference between the rich and the poor is how they spend their time. And I really commend you guys. It's not nice out there, and you guys braved the stormy weather to come out and improve your financial IQ and really learn some great strategies tonight that will help you build a pension. So, yeah, kudos to you guys. My name is Johanna Armstrong. I'm the owner of Island Life Financial, and I see a lot of new faces here tonight, so that is really great. If I didn't get a chance to introduce myself, I'd love to do that after the event. We will be around to answer questions. But my background is a little odd. I used to be a massage therapist for 10 years, and yeah, 5 years ago, I did a completely switch around, and I just love finances because I found out that I could massage people every week and they'd just get all stressed out again. And after talking to them, you get to talk to people a lot when you massage them for an hour. I'd find out their biggest stress was money. So if I could really help the underlying problem and help them understand money better, I thought I could make a bigger difference with these people. So that's my passion. I am all about abundance, and what I want for you is that you have enough wealth so that you can enjoy your life and live the island life. So that's where I came up with the name. Whatever that is for you, that you have freedom and you're loving your life and not worrying about your money, because you only get one go around, right? So you guys met my business partner, Dave. Oh, you want to come up here, Dave? I'll just introduce you quickly here. He's going to be presenting the second part here, but just briefly, you can talk about your background.
Brief. I'm retired now.
Yeah.
and Joanna enticed me to join her, which was great because she's helped me out about 5-6 years ago. She showed me about the exempt market and showed me the way in which I can utilize my biggest asset, my house, and invest in a way that I'm comfortable now. So I like sharing because I used to be a teacher. I used to be an auditor. Don't worry, not CRA. And I also work with the pension plan. And with the BC pension plan, I heard about the exempt market a long time ago, but I never decided to learn what it was until Joanne explained to me. That's pretty silly because I actually worked there, and they did do a lot of investing, and they start investing more. But that's who I am. I've done many, many different things, and I hope I can share my experiences and help you all out as well. That's just sort of the teacher coming out on me because I've done full circle. I started off as a teacher in a private school, and now I'm coming around and I enjoy teaching. So that's
Perfect.
what
Thanks, Dave.
I'm doing. Oh yeah, we're not sharing tonight.
Yeah, for those of you who were here 2 weeks ago, we had a presentation and we were sharing a mic, so now we don't have to do the relay race. So the main thing I want you guys to understand out of tonight is that the game has changed. If you think you understand or you're trying to invest the way that your parents did or your grandparents, it is not the same game anymore. And so what I'm about is finding out-of-the-box thinking financial strategies that are different than what you're going to hear about at the bank, okay? And I have to say, this strategy here tonight that we're talking about with Gord Johnson changed my life. Last year, I'm self-employed. I didn't think I'd be able to buy a house. The banks wanted a 35% down payment, and I'm just not willing to tie up that much money in a house. So through this strategy, it just blew open all possibilities, and I was able to buy a house. I live there for free, and I work out of it. It's just a dream come true. So there's many ways to implement this strategy, but he'll be talking about that in a minute. So basically, the main game changer is that the historical interest rates have really come down. Who here was investing in the 80s? Anybody? Lucky. You could have your money in the bank making 16%. Wouldn't that be great? Everybody was a good investor when interest rates are 16%. Not so cool. Who had a mortgage in those years? Yeah. It's not good timing at all, right? So since the 1980s, it's been going down. This chart ends in 2012. It's been going down even lower. And if you are trying to live on your savings at 2% interest to make $25,000 income, you need $1.25 million. $25,000 isn't very much income. And that's a lot of money if you're just trying to make it on a GIC, or I'm not even sure you can get GICs at 2%. So that whole game of just keeping your money in the bank isn't working. And what is the future trend? Well, these are some headlines in the newspaper. There's currently 15 countries that have negative interest rates in the world. What does that mean? Like, you put your money in the bank, guaranteed to come out with less? I think we kind of have that already here. It's called fees, but I definitely spend more at my bank than I get. So this is CNBC, and Canada could adopt negative interest rates within the next 2 years. So saving your money and earning interest at the bank no longer works. The Fed has killed the saver. So this, what used to work is just you work hard, you save your money, and eventually one day you're rich and you can retire and live off your savings. Not so anymore. Low interest rates help private equity moguls and hurt the average American. So today, the near zero rates are free money for investors, but murder for savers and retirees. So what I'd like to show you today is how to become one of these private equity moguls. Who'd like to be a private equity mogul? Who even knows what that means? Yeah. Well, we'll explain what private equity is, because it's quite a different game than what you might have traditionally heard at the banks. But tonight is just about learning the rules to this new game. So I'm really excited about teaching you about that. So without further ado, please, I want to introduce our first guest speaker. It's Gordon Johnson. He is the author of Turn Your Mortgage into a Pension. And I'm going to let him introduce himself. So please put your hands together for Gordon Johnson.
Tonight I want to take you a little bit through my journey and to how I actually came up with the concept and why I came up with the concept. It wasn't something I sat down one day and decided I need to write a book. It wasn't something I decided I need to go out and start teaching people anything in specific. But what it did come about was my own frustration with where we were at that point in our life. Now, before I'm sure most of you have seen these before. I think the professional term of this is they're a weasel clause. The lawyers make us say, basically, I am not licensed to this part of any of the products that we talk about are going to be talked about by the people who are licensed. I am not. I'm simply an educator. Any of the information that's done tonight is strictly for education purposes. Well, let's start off and I'll introduce you to a couple of friends of mine. This is Leroy and Jethro. Now, Leroy and Jethro are small farmers. They worked hard, but they never quite seemed to get ahead. I think we can often relate to that. Well, one day they came up with a brilliant idea. They said, you know what, if we could buy a pony, we could rent that pony out. We could take it to birthday parties. We could lend it out to people who wanted to haul, a little wagon with their kids. We can make some money. So they looked around. They found one for $100. And they thought, well, that's not a bad deal. So they made the arrangement with the farmer. They bought the pony, made an arrangement, said, next week we'd like you to bring it to our property. We've got to do a little bit of fencing and make sure it doesn't run away. Well, the next Saturday, a dump truck rolls up. Well, they were a bit surprised now. They were expecting to have this pony delivered in a horse trailer at least. The dump truck rolls up, lifts up, and out rolls this dead pony. Well, they weren't very happy. And immediately said, you sold us a dead pony. And the farmer said, no, actually I didn't. I sold you a live pony, but it died this last week. So technically, you own the pony. My job is to deliver it. If you would like me to haul it away, I can do that for another $25. And they scratched your head and said, you know what, we spent our last dollar trying to get this pony. We're trying to get ahead. Well, sometimes our investment life feels like that. Sometimes we think we make a good investment, we've done our research, we put out all the money we have, and it goes south. And we think, that's typical, I'm going to stop investing. I tried it, it doesn't work, I've had it. Well, they had enough experience in farming to realize that if you can get creative And if you can think things a little differently and have somewhat of a paradigm shift, maybe you actually can make what would appear to be a bad investment into something good. So they put their heads together and they came up with the idea of holding a raffle. So they printed 500 tickets at $2 a piece. They sold the tickets out, raffled off the horse. And they actually did quite well. Yeah, this is his pony. So the next week, they're in town, and they're going to the bank to put in their money. And they're pulling out their money and put it in there. And the farmer who sold them the pony said, hey, did whatever do with that pony? And they said, hey, you know what? Thank you very much. It worked out really well. We actually netted $898. He said, well, how the heck did you make that kind of money off a dead pony? He said, well, it was quite simple. We printed 500 raffle tickets, $2 a piece. We sold them all. He said, well, just a minute here. He said, what about the guy that won the pony? Oh no, he was really angry. We gave him his $2 back. so now that's quite a paradigm shift that can show that sometimes you can actually get creative. Now, I wasn't quite that lucky. I've been in financial services now for 39 years. I came into it right out of university. I've done various types of, I've actually been an international financer. I've worked in the private equities. My father and I owned a life insurance managing general agent. I had a contract bonding company. So I've done a lot of different things within the financial arena and consider myself fairly knowledgeable. I've done the securities course. I have my chartered financial planning degree. Had a number of other designations as well as for investments. But I never actually felt comfortable with what I was taught. I'm always a little bit thinking outside the box. And my father retired in 1992. We sold off the company at that point. He retired to Parksville. I sold out my shares in the company then as well. I had another company which I sold out 2 years later. But once the main sort of thrust of the company was gone, it was time for me kind of to move on. So we moved down to the Lower Mainland. Well, house prices have not always gone up, you know, contrary to popular belief right now. When we moved down to Vancouver, prices were actually going backwards. We had a very nice house in Prince George. It was a beautiful house on the Greenbelt. There's nothing behind us except great cross-country ski trails. We sold it for $135,000. We moved to Vancouver. We rented in Sunshine Hills in a house that wasn't even close to the house that we had left. And it was for sale for $375,000 and going backwards. Now, in retrospect, it was a good deal. But at the time, I'm thinking, if I bought this place, I would have to take out a mortgage that's double pretty well what I sold my house for. And it's going backwards. Why would I want to do that? Why do I want to wipe out my equity? We rented for 10 years. It wasn't until the end of 2003, early 2004, that the market finally turned. When we bought again, it was when I was 49 years old. Well, traditional financial planning doesn't tell you to start getting into the housing market at age 49. Your house then is paid off, traditionally, sometime in the mid-70s to late 70s. Well, the interesting was I was teaching financial planning at that time. And what I'm teaching is certainly not working for us. Because we're literally starting over in a brand new market with a house, huge mortgage. We had 2 kids in university. I had an investment loan. We were making good income, and we were struggling. And what I noticed was that when I was dealing with the brokers that I was teaching at the time, they were quite broke as well. And one of the main reasons they were broke was dealing with clients who couldn't afford to do anything. They would meet with them, they would do a great financial analysis for them, and say what you need is more life insurance, you need some critical illness insurance, you need to start putting money away for your registered retirement savings plan to try to look after your retirement. And the typical answer was, let me think about it. The real answer was, are you kidding? $500 a month? If it was 50, I would struggle. We're living in the Lower Mainland. We're living paycheck to paycheck. We've got kids in university. We've got car loans. We're paying huge gas prices. They don't have the money. And I thought, you know what? I'm exactly the same position. Partly because we started getting into the housing market at such a late time. Well, being the rogue that I typically was, I said, I'm going to have to look outside of my traditional training. Because the traditional training where I had was through life insurance companies, through banks, through mutual fund companies, securities, and it wasn't giving me the answers I wanted. So I felt like this gentleman here. He's got this puzzle together. He's got a picture of retirement. Maybe it's island life. Maybe it's someplace in the Bahamas. But he has this great picture of when he, remember the old ads, Freedom 55? Okay. They don't play those anymore. And that's about when I was starting. But the old Freedom 55 showed this wonderful couple going off in the sunset at age 55 because they had started much earlier, I think possibly at age 0 or 1. But I was in that situation as well from the training, and we have this picture of retirement, and I felt like you dump the pieces on the table and they just don't fit. You know, your picture starts to come together, but maybe some of the pieces are the wrong size, or they're the wrong color, or the wrong shape, and it just doesn't seem to come together. And that's what I was feeling. And I started going out to seminars. I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and that was an eye-opener. I read a number of other books. I started going to seminars that were put on by, one of the first ones I went to was by the Trump Organization. It was awful. It was probably one of the worst seminars I've ever been to. Did you go to that too? Well, aren't they wonderful? Basically, hi, welcome. If you think you're learning tonight, forget it. You need to sign up for my $10,000 course. You know? So now you know how Trump got rich. But I started picking up little pieces here and there, and it started to make the puzzle fit a little better. Now, it's very difficult to change habits. And we hear that. And I congratulate you tonight for coming out. One of the hardest habits we have to change is our way of thinking. Now, I learned in the last month how difficult it is to change a habit. And a month ago, I was working out at the gym, and I managed to strain my rotator cuff. I don't know if you've ever had that pleasure before. It was an eye-opener. I didn't know I'd done it right away. A couple days later, I woke up with a throbbing pain in basically everywhere it moved. And I went to get some help, which has helped greatly, but it's still quite sore. But the biggest adjustment is I have slept my whole life on my right side. And that's the shoulder that was bothering me. I couldn't sleep. So I had to flip around to the left side. I can't sleep on my left side. I have trained myself my whole life to sleep on my right side. I don't know why. Maybe I read someplace that you squish your heart and you die at night. I'm not sure. But I had to sleep, and I woke up every hour on the hour. And I was trying to roll back, and it would pain. I'd flip back. Well, by the end of the first week, I was absolutely exhausted. And it's, now I'm into the third week. I'm still exhausted, but it's getting a little better. But again, that's the whole change of habit. You know, when you sleep so long on one side, and you know now you have to switch, and you have to do something better, it's not easy. I'm looking forward to a good night's sleep again. So, and it's just, but one thing that really stuck out to me especially was our cash flow. All my training had taught me to build a nest egg, had taught me to look for long-term investments, to build this nest egg, so at this magic age of 65, we can now create some income. Robert Kiyosaki said, wait a minute, that's not very smart. We don't retire at 65, we retire when we create cash flow that pays our monthly expenses. Well, that was completely foreign to me. And completely foreign to the type of investments I had at the time, and completely foreign to what I was teaching the brokers in financial planning. And I was mentoring other people as well. And it just really struck me as something quite different. And I didn't have any idea at that point how to create cash flow, except possibly through investing in real estate. Well, I mean, we just finally got in our house. You know, we weren't in a position to invest in real estate. So I started to look and start to think about how am I actually going to create cash flow. And I was sitting in the office one day, I work out of the house, and my wife walked in. And I turned to her and said, Jan, I said, do you realize that if you and I both quit our job today, our income goes to zero tomorrow? Well, she gave me this very is this a trick question? she said, well, that is why we work. I said, yeah, but isn't it sad? Isn't it sad that we've been working now for 30 years, and we have investments, but they don't pay us any cash flow at all? They're all designed to this magic history point, some year in the future that we can maybe convert it into cash. I said, isn't it sad that we have not learned how to create capital that actually pays us cash flow today? And she said, well, that sounds great, Gord. How are we going to do that? And I said, I haven't got a clue. None of the training that I have had will actually teach you how to do that. And I said, but I'm going to find out. I'm going to do some research outside of my traditional training. I'm going to go to more seminars, going to read more books. Basically, I was trying to put her off and figure that at some point in the future, I would actually learn. Well, a number of seminars did teach me a few little tidbits here and there. It allowed me to put something together. And over time, I developed enough of a strategy for myself, which I'm going to talk about a bit tonight. And I wrote the book, Turn Your Mortgage into a Pension, which became a #1 Amazon bestseller the month it was released, and has hit #1 every month in the last year and a half. So it is striking a chord with people. And as Johanna has mentioned as well, it's teaching people a different paradigm shift. And that's what we want to do with the book. We're not giving all the answers. We're simply saying, look at things a little different. Look at things that might, tweak the way you're doing things or might have a way. To me, I didn't have this aha moment. I had lots of little aha moments along the way. And each one kind of built on the previous one. It kept building and kept building and kept building until finally I could say, okay, I now have a strategy. And I was the only person using the strategy because I wanted to see if it worked. And it started to work very well. So I started to teach it to some of the brokers that I was mentoring. And they started going out and teaching it. And then I started putting on seminars. And some of the people kept saying, we love what you're teaching, but we forget 90% of it. Could you put it in writing for us? And I said, well, possibly, but I don't consider myself a writer. I had done some journal articles for the industry, but this was a completely different type of effort. Fortunately, my wife, who is a major in linguistics, and of her own admission is a financial moron, was a wonderful editor. Because she said, after reading the book, she said, Gord, this is the first time in my life I think I know what you actually do. So but the whole purpose of the book was I could put it on paper, but when you're in the industry a long time, we use a lot of words that we think are very common. They're not. And that scares a lot of people from reading books. Well, honestly, most financial books are quite boring anyway, but quite apart from that, there's a lot of words that they get confused and they don't want to slog through. And my daughter, she's an English major, she's an assistant librarian, she was the other editor. I sent her a copy of the transcript and she phoned me and said, Dad, you need a glossary. And I said, why? I said, I made it very simple. She said, Dad, I don't understand all kinds of words in there. So I said, well, why don't you circle the words you don't understand? And I'm thinking, maybe here, maybe 6 pages later, maybe every other chapter. She butchered it. I don't think there was a page that probably had more than at least 6 to 8, maybe even 10 circles. Words like net assets, mortgage, amortization. These were words that were so common to me. I immediately got on the phone and said, don't you understand what net assets are? She said, no. She said, Dad, you've mentioned that my whole life, but you never once explained it to me. And I said, and amortization doesn't ring a bell? She said, well, it rings a bell. You talk about it all the time, but I don't know what it is. You never stop to explain it. And I thought, and another light came on. I thought, isn't this sad that we as an industry will go out and try to teach people using words that they don't understand? And that, I think, is a huge barrier to a lot of people picking up financial books, and it's a huge barrier for them actually doing anything. And this is often what ends up happening, because they stick their head in the sand, and this lady, it looks like a lot of fun, but I don't believe this was her goal at retirement. But it probably, unfortunately, for a lot of people, it's either here or, at Walmart greeting. Now, this is an interesting fact. When I ask people typically, and I did last week at a seminar, I've given you the answers. I'm not going to ask you the question now, but if you ask people, what do you think the Canada Pension Plan is? I had a room of about 20 people, not one of them was even close. And they were all I would say, well, there was 2 younger people there. Most of them were in their 40s and 50s. None of them had a clue. And I thought, you know what? You are getting ready in the next 10 or 15 years to actually retire. You don't know what the maximum is. I said the maximum now in 2016 has just been increased to $1,092.50 a month. That is if you have paid in your maximum for basically 30, 35 years. The average that's paid out is $629.33. Now, part of the reason the average is lower as well is a lot of people will take their retirement pension at what age? 60, absolutely. Because they get the opportunity and they take it. When they do, they reduce it by 30%. That's now going up to 36%. Now, if you even qualified for, you know, let's say $900 a month, if you take it at age 60, you're getting $600 a month. And that is not a great retirement. So I was looking at my own situation. Now, being self-employed, we tend to, I don't even say we dislike CRA more than the average person, but we certainly don't really relish all the extra stuff we have to pay. And one of them is a self-employed person actually has to pay double CPP. When you're working for a company, the company pays half and the employee pays half. When you're self-employed, we pay the whole shot. So what we do, as much as we can, is reduce our income as low as possible to pay the least tax and the least CPP. Well, guess what happens to our pension? We don't qualify for the max. We qualify, and that's true of a lot of self-employed people. Okay, let's shift gears a little bit now. When we're talking about paying off a mortgage, most of us have mortgages, how we buy houses. Long, long are gone the days when you could save up enough to buy a house. We pay a mortgage off over 25 or 30 years. Now, just a quick question here. If we have a $250,000 mortgage, what do you think it's going to cost to pay it off? 400? There's a few things it depends on. Depends on interest rate. It depends on your amortization period. One more thing. So down payment possibly. Something we typically don't think about is what tax bracket are we in? We pay our mortgage after we pay our taxes. Before you get your paycheck, Revenue Canada takes their chunk. What you're left with is what you pay your mortgage with. So the higher tax bracket you are, the more you're actually going to pay for your house. So for those of us who've worked really hard to keep our tax bracket low, we may not get as much of a pension, but we don't pay as much for our house either. So now, here we're showing a $250,000 mortgage. We're talking here about an average tax bracket of 20% and an interest rate of 4% over the life of the mortgage. Now, in order to pay that $250,000 mortgage off, before we get the money to pay it, we have to give Revenue Canada $97,500. And then we pay the bank another $140,000. What it costs is $487,500. Now, that's a bit of a shock. We look at, basically, you're paying pretty well double for the mortgage, and a bit of a shock to, say, myself when I'm starting to, looking at a mortgage at age 49 and saying, okay, by the time I pay this thing off, I'm well into my 70s, and I'm going to be paying an awful lot of money for it. Well, the two problems here are taxes and our compound interest. So how can we possibly save for our retirement on top of paying for a mortgage if your mortgage is going to be $500,000? And the government says, okay, you pay off your mortgage of $500,000, plus you put into CPP, and you should, and then on top of that, look after yourself for retirement by putting money into an RSP or making other investments, which is very unlikely. It's interesting. In the last week on MSN, there was a headline that was done, I believe, by it wasn't the Fraser Institute, one of the other ones that said the average savings between 45 and 55 for retirement for people making between 25 and 50,000 a year. What do you think it was? Did anybody see that article? $250. I thought it was a misprint at first. They said for the average person between 45 and 55 making between 25 and 50,000 a year, their average retirement is $250. If they are making between $50,000 and $100,000 a year, it's $21,000. Now, that's not even close to setting up for retirement. Now, if we can redirect some of the money. Now, this is just a, is this in focus? Is it, I didn't think it was either. I thought my eyes are going here. Okay. But if I direct it to the red here, if you want to create a $1,000 a month income by generating 5% interest, you need to accumulate $240,000. Now, whether that's in registered funds like RSPs or in TFSAs or in other investments, you have to create $240,000 at 5% to create an additional $1,000 a month. Oh, that's much better. Thank you. I woke up. Now, how easy is it to collect $240,000 on top of paying off a $500,000 mortgage, on top of paying for kids' education, on top of buying food, on top of paying all the other taxes we do? That's why people have $21,000 or $250,000. Now, if that person that we're talking here qualifies for $600 a month pension, and they get the old age security, and let's say both husband and wife do, they're now looking at $2,200 a month. If they want to have a $3,200 a month income retirement, they should have another $240,000, which just coincidentally happens to be the number really close to what we pay the bank and what we pay Revenue Canada. If we didn't have to pay them, we actually could do something with our retirement. Okay, let's quit talking about some doom and gloom. Let's look at some good news here. Banks. Banks can be our best friends. You don't believe me? How banks become our friends? Can anybody doubt the fact that banks make a lot of money? Mm-hmm. They love, I mean, they're money machines. They can make money every which way going. But one of the biggest ways they make money is on the spread. Now, if we listen to what a bank's telling us, and we can train ourselves to be a bank, we can do what they do. Now, here's a situation where on the left here, we have Miss Finance-Wise, who's putting her money in the bank, and the banker says, here, I will give you 1.5%. On the other hand, we have a young person who's buying a car, who wants to get a $5,000 loan, and the bank says, well, you don't have a great credit rating. You've only been at your job for 3 or 4 months. So we'll give it to you at 8%. Now, you can see Miss Finance-Wise here. She's kind of looking around the corner saying, but you just gave him my money. You gave me 1.5. That spread of 6.5 stays with the bank. And most of us that put money in the bank, or that used to put money in the bank, think it's a good deal because banks are safe. And we need them because they're liquid. And we need a place to transact our business. And I looked at banks the same way. I looked at a bank the same for a mortgage. I had lines of credits I was investing. I had the mortgage. We had our emergency fund in the bank. We had a car loan. We had all this stuff. And every one of those is a profit center for the bank. Now, in the book, we're just going to flip to go this a little bit, but this is a situation in the book, and I'm not going to go through this much because you can read it. It's just outlining she has her house and a mortgage, she has a term deposit, she has a car loan, she has a bit of a bank account, she lives off her money, but in the top we're looking at a bank that says, you know what, we have almost everything she does with the bank is a profit center. Her mortgage is a profit center, her car loan's a profit center. Her term deposit is a profit center because they're loaning it back out for the spread. Her savings account is a wonderful profit center. They only give her 0.5% and they loan it out as well. She has a checking account, which is a wonderful profit center. They don't pay her any interest on the money in the bank and they charge her to keep it there. So the bank is taking all kinds of stuff. There's other ways of banking, like the all-in-one bank account, which rolls everything pretty well together. And it was a very interesting to me. Now, in this case, if she ran out her traditional mortgage over 25 years, it takes her 25 years to pay it off. If you flip it into what's called an all-in-one mortgage, and Joanna can talk about those a little later when she meets with you, but by changing nothing except the type of mortgage or the type of accounts you have, you can knock off, maybe 8-10 years off your mortgage with the same cash flow. Well, when I first heard that, I didn't believe it. When I first heard it, I said, I don't understand how this works because I've been dealing with banks for a long time. I know they rip us off. I just didn't know how badly. And I went to a seminar, and a gentleman at the seminar was from a bank. And he said, do you know how a mortgage works? And we said, yes, I've had mortgages a long time. We pay them, eventually, hopefully we pay them off. He said, do you know how the mortgage is structured? I said, oh yeah, it's, 25 amortization, 5-year term. He said, no, that's the terms. You know how it's structured? Okay, but now I was going to think, okay, there's another answer here, and I haven't got a clue. He said, are you familiar with the term compounding semi-annually? And I said, I'm familiar with the term. It's never been explained. He said, do you know that when you got your mortgage, you signed a piece, in that 45 or 50 pages that you're flipping through to quickly get out of the bank. In there, you signed a statement saying that this was explained to you and you understand it. I said, well, that's news to me. He said, what it really means is that when it compounds semi-annually, is the bank only changes the principal every 6 months. So when we make a blended payment to the bank, they don't reduce the principal. If you look at the amortization schedule, it'll do that. But in fact, they don't. They charge you interest on the full amount for 6 months. So if you have a combination of 1,000 principal and, let's say, 2,000 in interest, they will take the 2,000 interest, they'll take the 1,000 principal, but they don't apply it for 6 months. So at the end of 6 months, you are actually paying interest on $6,000 that you don't owe them. Then they will make the adjustment. I said, okay, now that explains why I've never been able to figure out, looking at a bank statement, why it never jives. I said, I could never figure that out. I said, so you mean most of my life the bank has not only written me off in overt ways, but also covert ways? And he said, yes. He said, if you can change that one little thing by having it applied directly, you will save a fortune in your principal. Now, what was interesting to me, and something else he said that really got me thinking, is he said, with an all-in-one mortgage, he said, you are only required to pay interest only. And I thought, well, that's dumb. You want to get your mortgage paid off. And he so gave some examples. It still didn't make any sense to me, but I thought, why would I only want to pay my interest only? I want to get the mortgage paid off. After all, at some point, I would like to retire and be mortgage-free. And I went home and started thinking about it. And I remembered a seminar that I had been to a few months earlier. It wasn't Trump. It was somebody else who was just as bad. And he was arrogant. He was horrible. But he said something that made me stick. He said, first after he told us how wealthy he was, what a brilliant investor he was, and why we should sign up for his course because he's the most brilliant man on the planet, he said, yeah, you know him too? He said, I have a mortgage.
Somebody in Hawaii and got mad at him.
Yeah. He said, every wealthy person I know has a mortgage. And the reason is a mortgage is the cheapest money you will ever borrow. And if you know how to invest, you can get the spread yourself. And I went home and I thought, when I saw how this worked, I thought, you know what? That makes a lot of sense. I know how to make more money than, let's say, the bank. So if the bank right now is charging 3% interest, it doesn't take a whole lot to realize that I can get a spread on that I can keep. So if I actually do exactly what a bank does, where a bank will take investors' money, give them a portion of it, loan it out to somebody in a mortgage, and most of the bank's assets are in mortgages. That's where the bulk of their assets are. They have their mortgage out at 3.5, they're paying 1.5, they keep that spread. If I can do the same thing and think like a bank and go, I want to use other people's money. We've heard that term, OPM, other people's money? You know where we get it? Bank. Yeah. Most of these seminars will teach you can get it some other place, and they will teach you how to do that, but it's going to cost you. The bank has investors' money, which they are depositors. They're loaning to us as a mortgage. Do you really think a bank wants their money back? No, they don't. Absolutely not. Why would the bank want your money back? If you get it back, they have to get it out to somebody else. They're spending money on advertising because if they don't get it out to somebody else, they're still responsible to pay the saver. So they're more than happy if we do not give the principal back. They're getting their spread every month. So all of a sudden I clued in and thought, wait a minute, if I can get money at 3.2 and I can turn it around and I can get 6 or 7%, I'm doing the same thing a bank is. I'm using the original depositor's money, the bank is keeping getting a spread, and I'm getting a spread. Why would I want to pay the bank their money back? And when that sort of came together, I realized that's the whole idea of creating a pension. If I don't have to pay the money back to the bank, I get to use it. And if I can take the money and I can earn a 5 or 6% spread on it, my cash flow starts immediately, not 30 years down the road or 40 years down the road when my nest egg is finally together. Now, on the top here is a traditional mortgage. She has a 25-year mortgage, $1,300 a month. She pays every month. It's paid off in 25 years. But she has zero cash flow. Remember, she's paying that with after-tax dollars. So she has zero cash flow for 25 years. On the other hand, by implementing this strategy of saying, I'm going to borrow the money for my mortgage, but I'm not going to pay it back, I'm going to use the money that I would have paid back. So instead of having a traditional mortgage where I have a blended payment of interest and principal, I now have a mortgage where I'm only responsible to pay interest. So the principal I was paying back, I'm saving, and I'm investing. So we'll go back to the earlier slides. By changing the type of mortgage, you can free up to $10,000 to $15,000 a year on principal payments. Now, if I say I'm going to have $10,000 freed up, or $15,000, in my case it was $15,000, if I have $15,000 that I was paying out to the bank in interest on a mortgage and interest on a car loan and interest on an investment loan, and I wrapped them together and said, okay, the amount has gone up a bit, but the payment's gone down dramatically now, I'm going to save that principal and I'm going to invest it. Well, in the first year, I had $15,000. I did not pay it to the bank, I had it. So what I did now is when I invest that $15,000, where it cash flows. I'm not interested in mutual funds, I'm not interested in something that is going to save for the future, invest for the long term. I want to invest that's going to pay me cash at least every month and at the worst every quarter. Now, if you have to start with, your payment, in this case, she went from $1,300 down to $730, and that's outlined in the book. And in the first year, she had, I think it was $10,000 to invest. Her cash flow starts in year one. In year one, she's now got, let's say she had $10,000 at 8%. She's still paying the interest. If the interest is 3 and she's making 8, she's got the spread, but that 8% is paying her now about $70 a month. And if she does that every year, in about the 8th or 9th year, she doesn't have a mortgage payment. She has a mortgage, but the payment is generated by the investments of money that she did not pay the bank back.
How do you answer people who argue that you want to pay down the mortgage debt, and not paying down the mortgage debt is being irresponsible?
Well, if they honestly believe that, pay it down. But often, once you find out how it generates cash, they will change your way of thinking. I'll give an example of that a little later. But in this case, by the 8th year, the investment income is actually making her mortgage payment for her. Then, each year after that, it actually starts creating a positive cash flow. In the same 25-year period, instead of just paying her mortgage off, she has the same mortgage, but she also has about a $1,300 or $1,400 a month payment coming to her. So the investments are paying the mortgage and giving her an additional $1,300, $1,400 a month. When they grasp that idea that, okay, I still have a mortgage, but what I've done is I've paid it, down, borrow back whatever invested, all of a sudden the mortgage doesn't bother them because they've got the offsetting investments. But more importantly, they have an income. Now, I've often heard, and I had one case where it was an older couple who said, we don't want to pay the mortgage off because when we die, we want to pay the mortgage off. When we die, it's better for the kids to have a clear title. And they were in their 50s, they said, and we do not want a mortgage. When we retire, we want it gone. We've worked really, really hard to have our mortgage gone. And I said, great, so you've got no mortgage? And they said, no. I said, are you earning anything off your house? And they said, what do you mean? I said, so you don't have a mortgage, but you still have taxes, you still have utilities, you still have your heat, you still have your gas, you know, you've still got payments every month. Is your house paying for those, or are you paying for them? And they said, well, we're paying for them. But we want to have the house clear title so that when we die, the kids get a clear title house. I said, okay, let's switch this around a bit. I said, you've got a house that's worth about $500,000. This is when I talked, it's now worth about $7,000, but it was worth about $500,000, it's paid for. Now, if you both die in the next few years, you have 3 kids, they're going to inherit approximately, what, $165,000 each. And they said, yes. I said, but if you use the equity in the house and you invest it, it will create an income for you. And they said, but then we've got a mortgage. I said, yes, but more importantly, you have investments and an income, so that the income will pay for your mortgage. I said, now, let's say you do this over a number of years and you've still got your $500,000 house. You now have a $250,000 mortgage on it, but you also have $250,000 of investments. I said, your equity in home is exactly the same. You've still got $500,000. The difference is you're now earning money on the $250,000 that will give you a monthly income. Now, I said, in both situations, the kids are going to end up with exactly the same. The difference is now you will earn an extra amount of money. You will earn an extra couple thousand a month. Which is more important to you, having your kids earn exactly the same and not have an income, or earn exactly the same and you get $2,000 a month now? What do you think they chose? He read my book 8 times. He said it's the only financial book he's ever read in his life. He said, I understand it, and I'm going to do it. And they're happy. The investment advisor I sent them to is also very happy. Now, I want to talk a little bit about my kids here. My daughter is 29, her husband is 28. This is the young lady who edited my book, or helped edit my book. Now, they live in Prince George. They both have good jobs, they both have pensions. Their home's worth about $300,000. They've got a mortgage of $237,000 at 2.84. Now, the reason they didn't go the all-in-one is they only had 10% down. You need 20% for the all-in-one. They got a car loan of $15,000. And now, they did have enough money to buy the car, and actually they bought a Ford Escape. I said, no, you're going to finance it. The reason you're going to finance it is I want you to have a budget where you're going to be paying $1,500 a month. I want that as part of your budget. So next July, when it comes up, they're going to flip it into the all-in-one. Their payment's going to drop from $1,500 a month down to about $659 or $660 a month. That will free up about $10,000 a year. Does that change their cash flow at all? Does it change their cash flow? Okay, yes, because they've invested. Does it change their cash flow from the standpoint, are they having to find an extra $10,000? No. This is exactly the same cash flow they have today. I'm not saying to this young couple who wants to start a family, you have to come up with an extra $10,000 a year over the next number of years to retire. That's the traditional financial planning. I'm saying you don't have to come up with any money. I'm going to find it for you. We're going to go into interest only, and this is what Joanna's learned. You take the money, and they're going to invest it. So without having putting any additional money out, for the next 10 years, if they can earn 8%, which they can, that's being conservative, their mortgage payment's now covered. So that's freed up an extra, basically, from right now, like $1,500 a month. Now, at that point, they will be, 40 years old. They don't have any mortgage payment. And she said, I don't really want a mortgage, again, but I sure like the idea of having an extra $1,400, $1,500 a month. That would make a huge difference in our life. At that point, she said, we don't need to go on and create a pension per se, because she's an assistant librarian for the city. She has a pension. My son-in-law works for Canfor. He has a pension. They said, what we want to do is save the money to invest. So at that point, once their mortgage is covered, they're going to switch over to the TFSA, and they're now going to put the $10,000 into the TFSA for the next 25 years. If they earn the same 8%, it'll grow to almost $800,000. If they draw out at 5%, that'll give them an income of almost $40,000, leaving 3% to offset inflation. The interest is almost $8,000, which means they'll have a pension of approximately $2,650 a month, tax-free, because it's coming out of their TFSA. On top of that, they will both have their maximum CPPs, both have their old age security, and have 2 pensions. Am I ever jealous? If only I had known this when I was younger. Okay? And the fact that they create all this without any additional savings. They're not having to go into they're not having to skimp and save and come up with an extra $10,000. It's going to be created just by using this strategy. If they stayed on their existing course, they'll pay off their mortgage in 25 years. They'll be about age 53. Then they can divert about 18,000 TFSAs. For the next 12 years, it'll grow to about 369. They will then have an income of about $1,500 a month, leaving 3 offset. Which would you rather have? $2,650 after tax or $1,500? The main difference as well is during that whole time of 25 years, they've got an outlay of $1,500. By switching over to the strategy, in the first year, they start creating cash flow to pay their mortgage. So at the end of 10 years, it's paid for by somebody else. This is a savings strategy, not a leverage strategy. Now, if somebody has their house paid for and puts a mortgage on and invests, that would be leverage. If you have a traditional mortgage where you have your blended rate of your principal and your interest, and you switch to interest only, and you save that difference that was principal, that is savings. Okay? If you are saving it now, you want to be very tax efficient as well. So one step, before I take the savings and say, here, Johanna, here's my $10,000, before I do that, I take the money, I pay down the line of credit or the mortgage, borrow it back, and then give it to her. Now, what that one step did, by paying down and borrowing back, when I borrowed that money back, the purpose is for investments. Interest is deductible when it's used for investment purposes. So in their case here, they would still have $237,000 mortgage. That hasn't changed, or $247,000. They've paid. Saved the $10,000. They paid down so they got $237,000. Borrow back the $10,000. Stays at $247,000. The difference is that the $247,000 is now split. $237,000 is a mortgage. $10,000 is investment loan. So if they do that every year, they're converting their mortgage into an investment loan. So again, we talked earlier about Revenue Canada taking so much of our money. This is a way of keeping it back. Saying if I can write off the interest, then Revenue Canada actually gives me money back, which means that I can accelerate the whole program again. Okay, it's not going to be easy. Now, the reason it's not, it sounds wonderful, and it does work. I've been doing it for a number of years now. I have a number of people that do it. The hard part is keeping strategy foremost. Because when you switch from the regular mortgage to interest only, you immediately have cash flow. What do you do with cash flow? Spend it. Yeah. No. You don't want to spend it, because with the strategy, if you spend it, you will not be doing anything but having a really happy, great life now, but you're still going to have a mortgage at the end. You have to be disciplined to say, okay, we live on what we have now, we're going to use that to invest. And once you start doing it, investing maybe in $5,000 amounts, it doesn't take long, 3 or 4 months to get together $5,000, and all of a sudden the next month you get a check from interest, it goes like, wow, this works. Now let's save the next $5,000. The real key to this, I found, is to get the wife on board. If the husband is on board, or not on board, and the wife is, it will work. If it's the other way around, it doesn't. Men like their toys. They like new trucks, new cars, boats, skidoos. But if you together, you can say, this is our commitment. We are going to do this. We're going to stick with it. And the nice thing is, it starts right away. Like within 4 or 5 months of starting it, you can actually see cash flow coming. And then you say, yes, this works. And now it becomes, something that just goes. That's why I say it's not going to be easy, but it's definitely worth it. My mortgage, when I started this program, was $1,650 a month. I had a car loan, an investment loan. I was paying $2,650 a month. When I switched over to the all-in-one, my payment dropped to about $1,650. So I had $1,000 a month and stuck with it every month. At the end of the year, we actually had $15,000, not $12,000. I still aren't quite sure where that other $3,000 came from, but I was happy for it. And we stuck to, and it just every year has grown from that. Today, my net mortgage is under $400 a month. My mortgage is exactly the same. So in about an 8-year period, we went from $2,650 down to $400. So it definitely works. Ralph Waldo Emerson stated that an ounce of action is worth a ton of theory. Now, you can sit here tonight and listen, you can read all kinds of books. If you don't actually do something, you may be more intelligent, but it's not going to get your goals. And if you would love to turn your mortgage into a pension, and if you've already got a pension, great. Would you like an extra pension? I don't think anyone's turned down. If you're getting CPP and it's max, great. Would you like an extra $1,000 or $2,000 a month? I started the program in my 50s. I'm 61 now. Next year, or about in a year and a half, I will not have a mortgage payment. My investments will cover it. Now, if I had not started this strategy 8 years ago, I would still be paying out $1,650 a month plus. So within approximately 10 years, and the only reason to take that long is the first couple investments I made were not so good. They sounded good, but they don't cash flow the way I still was not thinking completely in cash flow. Now I do. I only invest for cash flow, and that makes all the difference. But that is it. Thank you very much for your attention, and good luck.
Thank you, Gord. That was
welcome.
wonderful.